Quiet, please! Don't tell me there's not a conflict of interest.
Too close to home.
Only the ones who have the mic can talk. I was having my hand up over here and you walked straight past me. What? Generations just trying to speak.
Don't you think this is just putting more pollution in the air?
Yes.
That we don't need just some more chemical stuff. Like it's just silly. We don't need pollution. We don't need to just die from something that's silly. We don't need this.
No, what's the point?
John Diddy, Master Mariner. Bearing in mind that most of the waste timber and spoil is going to come from the London area, and bearing in mind that some of that spoil will be cleaned and returned to Cliff on Route Thames. Surely the ideal place for this would be Medway Ports. Why doesn't this company go there?
He just put his hand up.
Economically on the end of the grain, it just wouldn't work, okay, because of the cost that they want for rent.
Probably had up for 10 minutes.
Cheaper rent at Ramsgate! That's it! Cheaper rent at Ramsgate!
I'll admit to that.
Cheaper rent at Ramsgate!
Can I continue, please? I'm trying to be a gentleman here, and I would like to think you...
I don't see no gentleman in front of me at all.
Let's go to Ramsgate! It's cheap!
I will continue despite the heckling. I'm not a politician, I'll tell you that. Right.
My husband don't like.
Don't care about Ramsgate, it's just so cheap.
We have looked at Sheerness, but Sheerness could not accommodate all the operations. But also the Ro-Ro operation up there, well, the Olau line went out of business. So it all needs sorting out, whereas down here, the facilities available are excellent.
Yeah, of course. And the rent.
Therefore,
I'm just trying to work out exactly. I think there seem to be two things here.
Microphones at work?
Sorry. I mean, I think everybody can tell from the passion in the room. We've got a hall full of people who really care about this town and want to see some vision, some innovation, some creativity really in developing this as a place that clearly has a future in terms of tourism and leisure. And that's, I think, you know, what's coming over here. And there's a degree of fear and mistrust that's being expressed, and I certainly feel this as well. And I thank Ramsgate Town Council for giving us all the opportunity here, because clearly when the first presentation was made, there were only 2 residents, so it's really good that we have got this opportunity. What I'm concerned about, and I think that probably a lot of people are concerned about here, and there is a question at the end of this, is that have we seen the presentation that was put to Ramsgate Town Council this evening?
Yes.
Because I can't understand how anybody could make any kind of decision on the basis of such a slight presentation. And we know that lots of the questions that people are asking you here are simply not being asked. We've got nothing comparable to base any information on. You know, I would want to know about other existing sites of this sort of operation elsewhere in the UK or anywhere else. All sorts of information. The only figures, the only things that I saw up there were jobs, which seems to be very precise. We've got 22. But there's nothing else that's precise. I mean, where were those figures plucked from? So that seems to me to be something, because obviously everybody in the area wants jobs. So they're thrown into the mix as a bit of a sweetener, along dangling with some promise of getting back our ferry service. But nothing seems evidence-based, nothing to support it. So why go to Ramsgate Town Council or anyone else with such a slight presentation? So for one, if I was to make any decision about anything, my gut feeling is I absolutely wouldn't touch this with a barge.
Panel. Good evening, fellow residents. My name is Ross Bissett. I'm probably about the least qualified person to talk tonight, so I've just lived in Ramsgate for just over a month.
Welcome to
My wife and I have spent the last 5 years looking along the coast, everywhere from Polperro in Cornwall to Plymouth to Portsmouth to Brighton, all along that coast, and we've decided that the best place to come and live for the rest of our days is Ramsgate. That you want to put an industrial unit right in the middle of the Royal Harbour of Ramsgate. You've got to be joking.
It's a joke!
Disaster Brothers.
You've been strong enough to come here and defend what you're trying to do, and we're going to go back on this. And all I want to know, and I'll ask you just a simple question, and I just want a yes or a no answer. Will this increase the pollution in the air and the water, or will it decrease it?
It won't increase it.
It won't increase
So
it.
it will decrease it.
It will, to a certain extent, you could.
Depopulisation.
Yeah, that's very right.
We can work consulting about it. A couple of little things. This young lassie down here is probably, what, 10 years old? Yeah? She's worried about carcinogens. You go to Wicks, buy a bag of cement, it warns you on the side. It's a carcinogen. You wouldn't have an asbestos factory. That is classed as a commercial. Commercial to me is ferries, boats, shops, not industrial. When you're making something, that's an industrial unit. You're making blocks, you're industry. It's industrial, it's not an industrial unit, it's possibly a commercial site. It can be done far less cancerous, dangerous things than making concrete blocks or possibly polluting or not. The third thing I'd like to say, we still have not had a direct question. Yes, you recycle. You recycle the water in tanks, gets recycled. There's only so many times you can still wash the same old stuff. Pardon my P's and Q's. You then have to get rid of that eventual toxicated liquid that's like fracking and everything else in this country. And how are you going to take it away and where are you going to put it? Please answer the question about the water.
Anyone? So can we have an answer please on where you're going to put the wastewater? Can we have an answer please? Where it's going to go? Wastewater! They're laughing. Please answer.
As was said earlier, the intention is to recycle the water. You're right, there will be waste products as a result of that. There's reference to disposal of specific waste products to a licensed site in Cliff. They will be disposed of by taking them out in a boat, so they wouldn't go by road. If there is liquid waste that cannot be disposed of to Cliff, then it will be taken out by tanker and it would have to go to a registered site. And we would have to do that through Environment Agency authorisation.
And that is how on earth did it ever get to this stage in the first place? Because it does rather smack a very weak local government. And I'm sorry I'm making a point here. I think Thanet District Council clearly have not performed well in the last decade. A number of eyesores around Thanet, which it has been responsible for.
Yes.
There's no urgency, there's no sense of direction, there's no sense of vision, as someone very rightly put it up over there. And it does beg a belief that an application like this should even get as far as it has.
Yes.
But I think it has because there's been a little bit of, so far, quiet manoeuvring.
Yes.
I certainly never heard anything about a meeting in December. It wasn't very well publicised, and one suspects that people here are quite rightly suspicious of Thanet District Council. The only hope we've got, gentlemen, of getting this development is if TDC continues to behave in the way it normally behaves, which is very badly indeed. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of people here this evening who are going to make sure that everything from here on in is very well scrutinised. And I call on our town council to put their, shall we say, small conflicts of interest to one side, because they're all, to a man, members of the Thanet District Council as well. And on this occasion, well, exceptional one, sorry, I apologise. On this occasion, I call on the town council to represent the community of Ramsgate and to make sure this application gets no further.
Yes.
Good evening. I just wanted to ask about whether you expect the environmental screening and Natural England to approve the application if there is one, bearing in mind you have an SSI so close. And if that SSI is this area of special scientific interest, if that is an issue, bearing in mind it's several miles away, doesn't that suggest that there would be air pollution from this plant operation? And also, with the area, we have two of the largest offshore wind farms in the world, and a lot of that's because we have high winds. So again, back to the air pollution question. And the other question is, or point, is that I work with quite a lot of the people that work on the offshore wind farms, and quite often they can't get out because of the weather, which would mean that we've got perhaps queues of this material sitting in the port, which again, being that it's in the port because it's high winds, is that going to have an impact as well?
Yes. Good point. It's just round the corner from Ramsgate.
I have no prejudices at all about how the
environmental impact. We've talked about pollution, we've talked about recycling, but the visual impact as you're walking along our beautiful cliff top, looking down on our harbour, destroys me every time that it's unused. It was interesting when it was a working ferry port. It's interesting that the concrete mixers are down at the other end, although that they're not particularly appealing. What I don't want to look at are piles of wood chippings or wood blocks curing piled up high on the ferry terminal next to our beautiful Undercliff beach.
No mention has been made of noise. We suffered the Hawthorne running its generator all the time for 24 hours. No one actually did anything about stopping it. It was relief when it left. Now, if you've got a crushing plant for crushing aggregate and a wood chip plant, these are very noisy machines. You've said it's only going to be running office hours. One hell of a racket, I tell you. I've seen these in New Zealand. Thank you.
That's a good point. More pollution.
Coming to the end of the questions, I'll finish off with the star of the show, Councillor Driver.
Just a couple of factual points. I've been speaking with the Environment Agency today to talk about this application, and the chap I spoke to for about 3/4 of an hour was absolutely amazed by the fact that this development is going to be located less than 500 metres from a site of scientific interest, less than 500 metres from a European special area of conservation, and half a mile away from something that's called a Ramsar. It's nothing to do with Ramsgate, but it is a site of international scientific importance. And the guy at the Environment Agency kept on telling me he was neutral, but he told me he was absolutely gobsmacked by what was planned. And one thing he did tell me is that they will need an environmental permit from the Environment Agency to carry out those proposals that they've been talking about tonight. And he said that when they make an application for an environmental permit, not only will they have to have the impact assessment that Brian White has been talking about, but they will also have to be able to go out to public consultation. The Environment Agency will be doing a public consultation like Thanet Council on the planning application, and I think if this goes ahead, there will be thousands of objections to the Environment Agency and to Thanet Council, and this will be blown out of the water. And one final point I want to make. A lot of people have been talking about freedom of speech tonight, and I'm certainly a great supporter of freedom of speech. One of the important things about freedom of speech is that you listen to what the other person has got to say. I've got no confidence that this lot here have heard what a representative group of about 300 residents of Ramsgate have got to say, but yet they still say they're going to go away, they're going to work out plans, they're going to come back, they're going to push this through the system. Well, in my book, that's showing disrespect to the people of Thanet and to people of Ramsgate, and it's a downright insult to local people to come here to say you're going to consult, not to listen, to go away and come back with the plan without any changes. They should be ashamed of themselves. And one final point. I'm getting there. One final point. The government last year conducted a special inquiry into civil servants who leave the employment of the government and then get employed by the private sector and come back and lobby the government. They call it, it's got a technical term, they call it the revolving door. And what the government has done with the revolving door, it's banning civil servants for 3 years from taking employment after leaving the government and then going to come back in the private sector to lobby the government. And what the government said, interestingly enough, was that the restrictions on the revolving door should apply to local government as well. So people like Brian White and people like Good Brown cannot leave Thanet Council with their knowledge and their contacts and their expertise and then pimp it out onto the market in order to use their contacts internally to get favourable treatment.
So you did what Thanet Council done?
It might not be against the law, and I'm not for one moment saying it's against the law or that they're breaking any laws, but what I am saying, it's downright immoral and unethical.